one thing to emphasize, and I think you've been emphasizing it really nicely and very clearly, is there's a world of difference between sort of thinking we understand this stuff and actually experiencing it. So we could talk about non-duality, we could talk about no self, and it's almost totally irrelevant until we experience it. Until we experience it, we don't realize how much all of my experience has been filtered by my sense of self, has gone through the valve of my sense of self. We just don't realize it until we've had a glimpse that it's never really been there. So that's one thing. Like just having some understanding of the idea of it. It's like having heard the name Beethoven, but you never heard one of his symphonies.
Henry Shukman, it is a true joy and pleasure to have you on the podcast, on the show. So thank you so much for coming. How are you?
I'm really well, and right back to you, Simon. I'm really happy to get this time with you. Happy and honoured, Thanks for having me on.
Oh, please, come on. The honour is all mine. And I want to start by saying I do feel a huge resonance with you, Henry. And without going into too much detail, I'll put it down to one word, and that is love. I think you put such an emphasis on love, and I really appreciate that. Some people talk about happiness or emptiness, and all those things have their place. But certainly, I think where I'm coming from and what resonates with me is love. So I just wanted to start by saying that your emphasis on love, I hugely appreciate, and I really resonate with.
Thank you for saying that. I'm glad to hear it. I think it's the most important thing in the end. I think it's what it's all for. And I also feel, based on certain experiences I've had, that it's, in the end, it may even be the only thing there is. But we could get as we go.
I completely agree with you. And you sent me an email before recording, and I really appreciated it because you said you'd watched a couple of my videos. You watched my Kensho video, and I was very touched by your email. That's the first thing I want to say. But I'd love to know what you made of that, because it's quite fresh for me. And obviously you're many decades down the line, and I'm always interested to learn and to get feedback. There's no such thing as the finished article, and I know you know that. So I'm interested, how you found that. But certainly my experience in that experience was love. To me, non-separation obviously equates with love. And, equanimity with what is, and we can go more into that. But fundamentally, love, that is it, really. So, yeah.
Well, I mean, I think I would, I totally agree with you, and I'd qualify it a little bit because there are different kinds of love. We have to say that. And but the two things that, well, actually, there were several things that were totally the hallmarks of a Kensho experience in your video. And I think it's really great. I mean, it's a joy for me to, I honestly, just a tiny little bit of background. I stumbled into a deep, deep Kensho experience when I was 19 years old.
I wanted to ask you about that.
I just knew nothing about spirituality. I wasn't at all interested in it. And this thing suddenly happened to me where I knew I'd seen the truth of my being, which is that I was utterly non-separate. There was not a scrap of me that was separate from any scrap of the whole universe. Is what it really felt like. And when I sort of came out of it and was clearly this person again in a very different way, but clearly a person, I just was overwhelmed by this sense of love. It was as if I just discovered that, there was no way of not being part of everything. And exactly as you said, that must translate to a sense of total love, because, love is closeness and intimacy and being close to whatever it is. You can't feel love for something or for somebody without feeling close to it, And when you feel not just close, but integrally one with, and if it's one with everything, it's a total unconditional love. So, but you said in that video, that certainly struck me very much. But you can feel love without Kensho.
Mm.
For sure, of course, and mercifully so, because Kensho is relatively rare, in human experience, in one sense. But you can also you talked about the sense of self. You've seen right through it, or it's evaporated, or it's gone, dropped
Mm.
away, fallen away. And all those ways of describing that are true. You can see through it. You see that it's never been what it cracked itself up to be. You know, and you also talked about the non-separateness, and you talked about that energy.
Mm.
That's a feature of Kensho. I mean, because all the work that we didn't know we'd been doing in being who we thought we were. There's a
Yeah.
lot of energy tied up in that, and
Mm.
when that energy is released from having to be in servitude to this, sense of me that needs so much support to keep convincing itself is real, which it isn't. When all that energy is unlocked, you just get this surge of
Mm.
energy. And so that's another hallmark. So it's very nice. I'm very happy because that experience happened to me over 40 years ago, and I knew then that I'd just seen the reality of my life and of
Mm.
this experience, of being human, and I couldn't talk about it to anybody. There was I never knew that. I knew it was real and sort of an authentic somehow seeing of something that was true, but I had no resources whatsoever for
Mm.
understanding it, or even knowing where to go to try to get some sort of input on it and what I should do next. And in my lifetime so far, I've seen that almost sort of freakish thing, it seemed to me, almost become mainstream, which is
Mm.
just so wonderful to see. Because as the interest in meditation has grown exponentially, and of course most of it's in mindfulness, which is not the deep stuff, but it's really, really helpful. But to see now that actually, yeah, interest in the deep stuff is swinging around and becoming much more. I mean, the fact that you have a nice big following on YouTube and elsewhere, is testament to that. And Sam Harris's Waking Up app, the fact that it's so popular, is also testament to that. And so, yeah, it's just great that here's a guy who's able to come on and just talk about it very clearly. Thank you
Mm.
for doing that.
Well, thank you for your kind comments. That's really appreciated. Yeah, I was thinking as you were saying that. So it must have been early 80s, I suppose, when you had your shift. And as you say, it's gone mainstream, or it's going mainstream. Now, I have a background as a BBC journalist, and I still do some work for the BBC, and it's not gone mainstream in that sense. The papers, the odd little glimpse here and there, the papers, the big broadcasting, whatever, they still very much sort of shy away from this. And in fact, there's this view that the world is going to hell in a handcart. But as you say, there's this bubbling going on at the moment, and it's really exciting and it's really interesting. I remember Eckhart Tolle talking about something years ago that stuck with me around, as ego rises, and we're seeing that, I would suggest. Also, what we're talking about here is rising at the same time, but it's not as noisy, and so not as much attention gets paid to it. And that seems to be, that seems to be what you're talking about, and I'm pretty optimistic that's the case too. And from that point of view, it's an exciting time.
I agree. I mean, part of this is definitely about the general growth of mindfulness. If you have 10 million or 100 million people doing some kind of mindfulness practice, it's that much likelier that some of them are going to just trip into the deep stuff and find this non-separateness.
Mm.
And it may be that they're in a context of mindfulness training or knowledge that won't be able to address that, which is the vast majority of it. But it doesn't matter. They're finding it. I also have this feeling that the reality that we find in Kensho, it wants to be recognized,
Mm.
and so there's that. It's not only us being curious; it's sort of in some sort of way, it loves being recognized.
Yeah, 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 yeah.
And so, but I mean, maybe we should. I don't know where your listeners audience is at. Do they, you know, it's just like way out
I've got to be
there.
honest with you, Henry.
Yeah.
I don't tend to think too much about that, and I never have. I've somewhat eschewed the BBC mantra of always keep the audience in mind. I tend to go where I think is interesting, and that served me relatively well. And I think some of the I'm not equating myself with this. Something popped in my head is The Office, right? Like if The Office was done by committee, it never would have made. But so I'm not too worried about that, to be honest with you. And certainly on YouTube, more so perhaps than my podcast, YouTube love what we're talking about, and again, I find that incredibly exciting. And something I really appreciated what you said earlier is, you're obviously, you're a very accomplished and acknowledged person in the world of Zen, which obviously has so much tradition. And I was recording videos and I've been making interviews about this for a long time. And I'd had, shifts of note that had changed things for me, but not anywhere near Kensho. And then obviously I had this Kensho experience and I thought, well, I'm just going to talk about it. Like, why not? And some people have said, well, there's a reason people in certain traditions are advised not to talk about it. It can stifle other people and yada yada yada. Now, I don't come from, I've sort of dotted around and jumped around and really just been on my own exploration in various ways, which has been very interesting. But so I was like, well, there's no reason why I wouldn't talk about it. And so it seems that you are of the view that there's nothing wrong with that.
I think on balance, it's good because, first of all, I've found over the years of being a teacher that there is a significant number of people who have random experiences and don't know what to make of them. There's also, I mean, a lot of people have come to me who've been training in other traditions that don't acknowledge awakening of the kind we're talking about. I mean, I want to just say something about what this thing we're talking about, Kensho. It's you described it very well in your video, but it's a Zen term. It means seeing your original nature or seeing your true nature, seeing what you're really sort of made of, and you could say it's seeing what your conscious experience is really made of. And, they traditionally say there's two sides to that. One is that you can see through your sense of self, see that your sense of self is just a cluster of thoughts and ideas and stories. Some say it's also very subtle muscular tensions in the body reinforce those stories and ideas. And when you have a moment of Kensho, you're seeing through all of that. So you see that what you've taken yourself to be is only an idea. And once you see it's only an idea, you realize that this sort of lump you'd assumed was here called me, it actually doesn't exist. There's just the things that seem to be pointing to it. Ideas, stories, and maybe some subtle muscular sensation in the body. Or this is what they say. Or you see that the world of appearance appearing before you is actually empty. That it's just appearances. And saying it's just appearances is again taking away the certainty of its solidity. You see that it's just perceptual sensations. And so they say in the school of Zen that I'm trained in, which is called Sambo Zen, they sort of say usually a Kensho is sort of one or the other of those. It's more about the self or it's more about the world. And in either case, there's a great sense of oneness that comes with it, that non-separateness. But the sort of the clearest Kensho of all is when they both fall away, both self and world fall away. And you realize that, the whole thing The entirety of life has been a kind of construction. And so that's what we mean when we're talking about Kensho. And
Mm.
it's a rare thing. I mean, I think a strong Kensho is something that happens, at most half a dozen times in a life. What can happen as you go further down the path is you have lots of small glimpses. And there can also be, I'm sorry, I'm saying this, I don't know whether this is interesting. I hope this
Oh,
is
it's
interesting.
super interesting. No, super. Please carry on. Yeah, absolutely. This is great.
But what I found in my own journey was that, and I hadn't believed this was possible, but there can be something else that happens that's sort of Kensho, but sometimes it goes by different names, where the very part of us that can determine the distinction between non-dual experience or Kensho and ordinary dualistic experience, that part that makes that distinction, even that can fall away. And
Right.
that's when you sort of, it doesn't stop. Because, Kensho usually happens and gradually, it sort of fades. And it
Mhm.
may last seconds, minutes, days, weeks, months. It can last years. The consequence, not the intensity of the moment itself, but the aftermath. The can last for years, and in a deeper experience, it does. It just doesn't close again. The
Mm.
part I'd had, like a, I'm sorry, I just bring me back if I'm not
No, no, no,
going the
no.
right.
Listen, I'm intrigued. I'm loving it. Please carry on.
Well, here's, I mean, my little biography about this is probably similar to many. So I had this Kensho experience, and it was marvelous for a few weeks. I was away from home at the time, and I'd just written my first book, actually. And so I was very happy. I'd also been clear of this terrible skin condition I'd had all my life, and it had all cleared up. And before this Kensho moment happened. And so I was very sort of happy, a lot of well being. But then I went home a few weeks later. I'd been working abroad and then backpacking. And as soon as I went home, I just was completely unresourced for dealing with facing for the first time the trauma that I'd grown up in and with,
Mm.
which was now, because I was so open, I could feel it
Mm.
all. All my
Yeah.
ordinary adaptations and defenses were gone. And that was very difficult. And I had a hard time, for a few years, and luckily found my way to meditation practice and therapy and stuff.
And that's what
Then
they call a dark night, right?
dark night is a difficult term. It's a little complex. It's used that way as like a really hard time. But actually, when it was originally coined by Juan de la Cruz, John of the Cross, in the 16th century in Spain, he didn't really mean that. He meant going into a place where you just don't know anything,
Right.
a
Okay.
real emptying out of all our ordinary understanding.
Mm.
And
Okay.
in that dark night, from his point of view, the divine could reach him.
Right. That
So when
makes
he'd
sense.
let go of all his understanding of the world,
Yeah. Concepts and ideas and thoughts and all that stuff. Sorry, just to quickly jump in very quickly. So,
please.
um, just returning to what I spoke about in my video at the moment and coming home, and I'm very fortunate that my wife is very much with me in this, and that was so helpful because I think had I been with someone who I couldn't speak about that, it would have been very, very hard. But I remember walking down the street, high street near me, and feeling empty of Simon. At that point, not sure if Simon was going to come back, and then recognizing everyone coming towards me was empty, and
Yes.
and so obviously, I'm them, they're me, and not only that, the rubbish, I remember the rubbish on the floor and the graffiti on some shops that I would normally turn away from was just stunningly beautiful. So, and my mind would rise and try and understand this, and I very quickly realized that was not a good idea. It was like, no, 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 like just any kind of trying to conceptualize or understand or put it in a box of any kind was just a bad idea, and I just had to keep letting go of thought. And as long as I did that, it was beautiful and it was loving and it was heart opening and everything like that, and the energy was flowing and it was great. But anytime it went up into the head, how can you get your head around being one with everything and an infinity and all that stuff? It's crazy. So just the two things I'd say is that dropping of conceptualization that it sounds like you just described is not only nice, but like important, because as soon as you try and get your head in it, that's when things I imagine could go quite wrong.
Yes, that's exactly right. You can't. The mind's not invited to the party.
Nice. Yes.
To
Yeah,
this
exactly.
party. Yeah, that's exactly right. It's a beautiful thing to learn that you actually don't need it the way. I mean, it was a long, hard lesson for me to learn, actually, that I didn't need my thinking mind the way I did, but the way I thought I did. And it's often a surprise to people to find that. I remember my Zen teacher once saying to me after I'd had another Kensho while I was in Zen training, and she said, I said, but I got to think to sort of to do all the stuff I need to do. And she said, well, just watch. Do you see that the things that need to get done just get done? And she was absolutely right. I wasn't needed half as much as I thought I was.
I mean, that's the thing, isn't it? Is I interviewed Chris Niebauer, who's written a brilliant book, which I think is such a good one of these books that can appeal to anyone, whether they're interested in this or not. About the thinking mind, the left brain, etc. There's the split brain experiment, of course, and he's got this lovely line like, the thinking mind is the terrible GPS to reality, and and it does chunter away, and just as you say, just I mean, that hasn't stopped for me, but it's just knowing that it's chuntering away, and there does seem to have been this shift away from it, where there's this, let's say, awareness waking up to itself. It just knows, well, it's all fine. Like,
yes.
like chunch away all you like the kid on the back seat going, "Are we there yet?" But like, it's all fine, and there is this separation that seems to have happened on some, structural level in that way.
You mean separation from
the thinking mind, like that identification, and I'm reading a book at the moment. Well, actually, I got it ages ago, but I only just picked it up again, which is How Enlightenment Changes the Brain. And Jiddu Krishnamurti talked about this. He was like, structural changes happen in the brain, and like, I don't know anything about that, and I'd be really interested to hear your take. But I suppose, having spent so long, kind of in a way, actively dropping identification with thought, now it's just it feels like a shift has happened where that's it's just that the structure's fallen away, so that is pretty effortless, actually.
Yes. Beautiful. Well, that's what we hope to get to, where, because then it doesn't have to close. You don't actually. A lot of people have some moment, and I'm certainly one of them, and then basically the tide comes back, and it's sort of a memory, But for me, and that was true for me after that moment I described. But then when I mercifully got into Zen training 10 years after that, that's when I was starting to do the kind of steady, gradual cultivation and work that actually could prepare the soil, as it were, in case there was another strike of that lightning. I'm mixing metaphors, but but eventually, I did finally come to a deeper kind of experience where it just didn't stop. It still hasn't stopped. It's not that I'm in that blazing moment of absolute goneness all the time, but it's present. The reality of that is present anytime I want to remember, and I don't always remember.
Yeah,
but it's not a problem,
Yeah.
And I sort of, I actually feel quite I feel very warm-hearted towards the old Henry,
Right. Yeah. And I love that. When I saw on your website early on, because so many people want to come to this as a way to get rid of the separate self, or whatever you want to call it. And I love, just again, to come back to the word I mentioned at the start about love, of transcending it, in quotes, by loving it, right? And I so appreciated that about the way you framed it, because I think that's so lovely, right? Is non-separation means all of it wants a bloody hug, right? And
Exactly.
and so, like, when I was in that week of emptiness, and my wife was like, "Christ, where's my husband gone?" Although, there were definitely upsides, she quickly realized. But when Simon started coming back online, I was like, I'm really pleased to have him back. I wanted to, I'm like, and that's really lovely. I'm so pleased with that. I spent so long trying to love myself, and that work was so important. I'm so glad I did it before what happened. But
Yeah.
when Simon came back, I'm like, great. That I want to experience Simon. And I know this is kind of weird language for people,
Yes.
but
Yes.
you know what I mean, right?
No, that's exactly right. Because I mean, from the perspective of this loving, all-encompassing awareness, why would Simon be a problem?
Mm,
It doesn't have any problems. There's nothing it wants to get rid of. Actually,
mm, mm,
the only thing I say is it does seem to like to be recognised.
yes.
But it
Yeah.
doesn't mind. It doesn't mind not being recognised. It just enjoys being recognised.
Yeah.
So I think this what you're saying is very important from another perspective as well, which is that a lot of people with a, broadly speaking, Western upbringing do have. I mean, I say this because I've seen it a lot in students, hundreds and hundreds, thousands even of students that I've met with over the years, of shame of not being good enough,
Mm,
of having to earn their okayness, and
mm,
with productivity or whatever it is, that the things I've got to do, the ways I've got to feel, the ways I've got to behave, that will then make me, deserving of appreciation, of okayness, of measuring up, and I don't know, I personally believe that that's got origins deep in the very strange spiritual traditions that we've had in the West. I see them as very strange, where there's the doctrine of original sin, and
mm.
and my latest book is called Original Love, but to
Well, that's
counter
yeah, yeah.
that.
That's why I think original love is a beautiful way of framing it, and is much more true than that to me.
I
Personally.
totally agree, but one of the things that people can do when they come to spiritual practice and spiritual quest and curiosity and all that can be motivated by that shame. I want to get rid of myself. I hear this thing about awakening where you don't have to sort of be yourself anymore or something. Man, I want that because I hate myself. I've got a bad self. I've got
Mm,
this dismal self that isn't good enough. So how can I get rid of it? This is a great way. I'll do it, and that's absolutely wrong.
mm,
It's really the exact opposite. It's about
yeah,
including it and
yeah, yeah,
welcoming it and loving it. And then you can actually, the more it's welcomed, the more we can see what it really is.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah. Absolutely, yeah, yeah. I wonder how common you think this is, because so I do coaching. I'm not a spiritual guru type, but I do coaching because I have done before. Um, and like you, suffering was a big driver for me. Um, I I've heard you talk about that when you were young. There was a bit of undiagnosed ADHD, and I was a, and am a Jack in the Box type character. But then also, just I think inevitably growing up in unconscious environments, which is unavoidable,
Mhm.
um, and that suffering propelled me forwards. Like I was like a dog with a bone to try and find answers. And there were all sorts of really important moments along that way. But the the arguably the most important was I did inner child work,
Yeah.
and I've kind of made it my own, because really I would talk about seeing where we abandon ourselves, taking responsibility for our feelings, bringing love this way and then out, not in a egotistical way, but just tuning into where these contractions are and what they need and when they got frozen in time and so on and so forth. And I'm so glad I did that work, because I feel like it really set me up well for what happened. But then also now the coaching work I've still done, it's still that is my work, because I notice everyone has that to some degree. You spoke about that sense of, I need to prove my worth, that core shame almost, like everyone seems to have it. and maybe there's an inevitability about that because we are not complete until well we always are complete, but we don't recognize our completeness until we recognize, oh, okay, separation is an illusion. So maybe there's an that could well be the case. But every single person who comes to me, I work with on that level, and they often express surprise that other people have the same thing when absolutely everyone has it. But even people who've had a Kensho, a bit like you described, that you had this experience, but then afterwards all this stuff was coming up.
Yeah.
I've kind of forgotten where I started with this, but I'll finish by saying I'm so glad I did that work, and I still continue to do that work, and for me it goes so well with what we're talking about. Like a lot of people want Kensho, and that's a way to bypass, to use that common word, and avoid all this stuff. But actually, no, it's unavoidable anyway, and so merging these two works, the embodiment work and the Kensho, that's when I think the real magic happens.
I totally agree with you, because basically, I think you're saying this, and I'm just going to underscore it, that what we discover in Kensho, that boundless openness, it really is totally open. Therefore, whatever needs to be healed has a free path, has free access. It suddenly can come up, and precisely, I mean, that is how the healing really happens. Deep healing happens through being met by, in a sense, that dimension of us that never needed healing, because it's
Yes.
already all inclusive. So when the two meet, I think that is exactly. I mean, I would, I think that's a profound healing that is invited by these kinds of awakening experiences, and it's not always called out. That dimension of it, the healing, the capacity for the healing that it opens up. But at the same time, so I think that's a really good point. Thank you. But at the same time, I still want to say to anybody who's wondering about this, you don't need Kensho to do deep healing. So
Exactly. Yes,
the kind of thing,
exactly. And if
like
anything,
you,
I think doing the work beforehand, it can be a really good decision.
exactly, and it's especially so because you can't predict Kensho.
No.
Therefore, you may as well do what work you can do. So my whole thing these days has been about like, there's this old metaphor in early Chinese Buddhism that Zen comes from, of a cart track. And the cart track, it obviously has two wheel tracks, one for either wheel. And they say one of them is the gradual mindfulness work, which is basically clearing all the stuff that needs to be cleared, and working with it, and healing all that needs to be healed, and gradually learning to come back to this moment more and more consistently, and notice what's going on inside us emotionally and cognitively and conceptually. And the other cart track, the other track, a trail or wheel rut of the cart trail, that is original nature. That's always boundless, infinite, all inclusive, totally one, totally empty. And by the way, these are different dimensions that we could get into a little bit: emptiness, oneness, etc. But but that other cart, the two wheel ruts are always both here. But you can't make the second one show up. I mean, it's already here, but you can't make yourself recognize it. But you can work on the other one. And the more we work on the other one, it's all good in and of itself. But it also means that should the Kensho moment arrive and we suddenly see this other wheel track, we're in a much better place to start integrating it.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
I've really noticed that because there was so many places I would abandon myself, to use my terminology, and had these patterns, and the people pleasing, well, just so many, like we all have. And I did so much of that work, particularly in relationship with my wife, and that's often where I think
That's,
the rubber,
that's
the
close.
rubber meets the road, right?
Exactly.
But then since I've noticed it in these really subtle ways. Let me give you a quick example. I've been going to the same barber for years, just around the corner, and I go there, and I've got a background as a BBC sports reporter, and he's a big football fan, so we'll get into the sport chit chat. And I'm like, chat, 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 chat. And then I went there afterwards. I'm like, why am I doing that? Like, not that I've got a problem with chat, but the incessant chatting, like, and there's nothing wrong with it. But I was like, why am I doing that? And I noticed, oh, there's a subtle approval seeking in that moment. Like, so it's not a major thing; it's a small thing.
Yeah.
And so so it's become more and more refined.
Yes.
But the bigger stuff around expressing my needs, or showing vulnerability, or um, talking about with my wife my avoidant sides, those sort of stuff I'd started long before, but it just seems to have been really supercharged, or into these granular ways. So yeah, two things to finish what I'm saying. One is I'm so grateful for the work that came before,
Yeah.
and then to touch on a point you said, that it gets overlooked. I completely agree. People are so focused on things like, rest in being, or just the awakening side. And I really think what we're talking about here gets really missed. And I'm so glad that I've had this shift. And to me, if anything, it's been accentuated in its importance, not reduced.
Yes, that's beautiful. And I think the maybe the key ingredient there is it is actually again about the love. Because
Mm,
once the
of
love
course.
is strong enough, we don't have any fear. I mean, I had a lot of fear of emotion as a young man. I was kind of afraid of any emotion that wasn't positive.
Mm,
And I was also quite emotionally illiterate. I really hardly could parse out my emotions. It was just, oh my gosh, don't go there. This feels bad.
mm,
And it was I had to do a lot of therapy. Actually, it was my
mm,
different forms of therapy really helped me. But
mm,
the thing I would say, the more that the residue of a deep experience is about love,
mm.
then the easier it is to sort of come at whatever, like that's a great example of the chat with your barber. Exactly. There's some subtle fear or anxiety or something, that's people pleasing or approval seeking. Exactly. That. But if you, and then we track that down, and there's some kind of fear that he might not like me or whatever.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so, but if the love is the dominant, welcoming, allowing, flavor in our hearts, it's much easier to notice those things, and to, just instinctively, automatically, we feel a warmth towards them,
Mm,
rather than a banishing it. And so I
yeah.
like the way you did it with your gesture, down in here first,
Yeah.
then out. It's exactly right. It's
Yeah.
really, and that's part that I think that's a dimension of really being here now.
Yeah.
That,
Yeah.
if we're caught in the sort of narrative thread of a sense of where we need to go or something, and we're leaning ahead into the next moment, what's to come, as we often do. But when we really come to now, you know, we can drop into this place that's open. It's
Mm,
like a
mm,
little bit of a sort of gap that's always here.
mm.
Like I think of it these days. I mean, I'm always changing the language around it as things go, but at the moment, I'm feeling it like a blessed gap. There's always a blessed gap right here, and in that gap, I can feel what's going on here, and there's a love that is automatically present
Mm.
in the nature of the gap is aware. I mean, I'm just using terms. It doesn't matter, but we're talking about the same thing, really.
Yeah,
But I'm
absolutely.
finding it's been helpful in the teaching that I've been offering to invite, I get there myself right away, and then everybody can feel it.
Yeah.
I think it's contagious,
Oh, yeah.
you know.
Yeah, it's like a frequency, isn't it? It's really profound to see that. And just in terms of that gesture, like,
Yeah.
you're absolutely right. Um, Here and now, and but also I'd add is that I feel like the more you let go of, or I've let go of these um, abandoning patterns, you naturally become more centered anyway, because you're less out there, trying to fix things out there to make everything in here sort of feel all right. And that sort of centeredness, and as well that the love coming here and then out. So it's sort of two. It's almost like the two tracks you're talking about. That centeredness, that to me is with the energy settled down, and the bliss even that was part of it at the start. That centeredness is for me the gold. I remember I was walking down a train recently, and I was like, I just wouldn't change that for anything. That kind of centeredness, which also ties into open-heartedness. And I've noticed it so much with my wife, my kids, and my parents as well. Like, without doing much, it seems to have this I suppose it's that non-resistance, right? So there's nothing for things to bash up against, but just go. And I can see in real time, they just calm down. And that's that's what an expression of love that is, right? An effortless expression of love. It's the most beautiful thing.
Yeah, and you're describing, I would say, like, love for this right here now. And it's unconditional.
Unconditional.
And so, even circumstances. I remember once, like, I used to do a lot of travel writing way back, this sort of 20, 30 years ago. I remember once flying into Miami. Because I was living in the States at the time. And it was just like at a time when, tons of jumbo jets had landed at the same time, and there was short staff at the immigration desk or something like that. And there was this mass of people in the hallway to get to the main immigration desk hall, and it was hardly moving. And in a real, like, dense throng, 12 thick with people barely moving, just to get into the hallway, you'd begin the real queuing. And I noticed, this little arising of, oh my gosh, I can't deal with this kind of thing, this is going to be hell. And I just went into my awareness, just went into being aware. And it turned very quickly into gold, like you said. Like, what a privilege. Be among all these beings, But it doesn't. That's what matters. That's what being in the moment, being in now, here and now. It can really be this gratitude or love that wells up for the fact of this experience at all. Getting to be human, having this experience of seeing, hearing, feeling, all of it, and it's and fundamentally, I think it really is unconditional. That
if you resonate with what I share about awakening, self-inquiry, and emotional honesty, I want to share a few words about my coaching. I work with people one-to-one who are drawn to this path of waking up, growing up, and cleaning up, as they say, through deep presence, through self-inquiry, through emotional inquiry. I meet people where they're at, and deep transformation is absolutely possible. Now, I've been quietly growing this side of my work, and sessions are filling up fast. So I may have to soon phase out consultations, particularly with the group work and the retreats I'm going to be focusing on in 2026. But if this speaks to you, book a consultation via the link down below. Let's meet, let's talk, and let's see if I can help. Yeah, that unconditional, like for me, I really noticed like an actual heart opening. I realized for a long time, probably for the best part of 3 decades, my heart had been somewhat shut. I think there was sensitivity, that there were certainly reasons for that, and then there was just this opening. And so when I came home, the nice thing was to be able to love my wife, my kids, but without needing them to be any different. So even when they're it's like totally fine, like, that's a really lovely thing. But I'm reminded as well of something I read of yours where you spoke about reality or yourself flipping inside out and seeing that what you thought of as bad was not bad, and what you thought of as good is not good. And now that might sound like, what, that's bad, but we chase, or people tend to chase, right? You chase the good moments and you fear the bad moments, right? So desire and resistance, or you know what I mean. You put it better than me, but And so, but a beautiful, and then you've described things like, I really resonated with your description of, I think you've heard like the beauty of the humming of the refrigerator and just washing, is like the most mundane things. And so this awareness, this open-heartedness, this centeredness, whatever, and the presence that comes with it, that it's just this moment, is, rather than being like, oh Christ, this moment's rubbish, but I've got this coming up, or this shouldn't be happening, or I'm sick, or whatever it might be, is no, like it's all a blooming miracle. Like, and so this background essence of,
Yeah.
wow, like, oh my God, I might lose my job. Woo, how like I mean, I haven't been in that experience, but do you know what I mean? Like
I do.
this
Yeah.
existential fear about, oh, I
Yeah.
want the bad and I want to avoid the bad and I want the good. Like it goes, and therefore every moment then, however it shows up, seems, I don't, thus far, to be just, oh wow, like it is infused with this love. Come back to love
Yeah.
again.
Yeah, that's beautiful. I mean, what you were saying earlier about seeing the rubbish on the street,
Mm.
is a great example of that. The way I'd understand, I totally agree with you. And one lens on that we could bring in is about, like, so supposing it's sort of like, because we're seeking what we think is good, that very seeking, that very preference actually closes us off to what's already good here and now. So I was
Mm.
at a conference recently with a lot of highly accomplished people, and we began. I was guiding them in some meditations, and I just began by, like, everybody here has done a lot of achieving. What's it like to drop any need to achieve? And a lot of them were sort of, you were getting something from that. What about being an underachiever? What about being a non-achiever? What's it like when the need to achieve, can you tune into a dimension of your own being that doesn't need to achieve? Because it's like all the seeking of the things, I mean, yeah, they're good. They can be good things. But the very seeking of them is obscuring something even better, which is
Mm.
about our very being.
Mm.
It's about the miracle of anything existing at all, of our getting to experience anything at all. But it's not. I feel it's not only that. It's something about our very being
Yeah.
that is
And-
just, it in itself is kind of beautiful. The
yeah.
condition of just being,
Yeah.
so the seeking of the good and the eschewing or the avoidance or the resisting of what we think is bad, actually, those mechanisms will make us, they'll obscure this deeper pool of being that
Yeah.
we already have within us. And
Yeah.
for me, it took me a long time to get there. Actually, I had to have this deeper experience that I was alluding to earlier. And after that, it was like this root system of desires and preferences and wanting this and not wanting that, resisting and seeking. It was like a whole great root system had just been dug out and
Mm.
somehow come out in one big. I mean, I'd done a lot of work in the Zen cushion and therapy stuff prior, but there was a particular time when that just all was. It was like a great big digger had just pulled out the whole root system,
Right.
and there
In
was
one
just
moment.
this.
In one moment.
Well, I
I mean,
only
building up
in
to it.
the moment that it happened, I didn't know what was happening. There was a complete, just everything was totally gone. There just wasn't anything. In all the Kensho moments I'd had before, the few that there'd been, there was some impression, but in this it was just totally nothing. And gradually the world sort of reformed in a very confusing way, and there were no words. The first word that came up a few hours later was just "thank you,
Hmm.
thank you, thank you." It was the only thing I could say for a few days, but there was this great, this. So I mean, that was a turning point for me. That was when I'd never thought that I could I could really be changed. Actually, I'd had these, like that one Kensho moment I described at 19, and a few others later. But they didn't. They were amazing, and of course, they changed my worldview. But still, there was some core part of me that hadn't been reached, and I thought it never would. And that's okay. I'm just one of those guys. I feel very fortunate and blessed to have found this practice and to have these insights into the nature of things. But I'm always going to be at core kind of a troubled guy. That's just, there's a lot of reasons for that in my genealogy and in my early life and stuff. So be it. And I'll do the best I can. But actually, I was wrong. The track I was on of training, it made something else happen that I could never have anticipated. And and once it did, in the aftermath, I was always waiting for the usual stuff to come back after it, and it just didn't. It
Right.
just didn't. A month later, it hadn't. 12 years later, it still hadn't. And so but that's not like I didn't have to keep practicing. I was
No.
doing all the things that sustained it. But I'm sorry, this is a long.
No, no,
This,
no,
this
no. I'm
really,
loving it, and I'm just going to write something down because it's just came to mind. But please carry on.
yeah, I'll just say that this is like I'm trying to say something sort of my personal experience about why the seeking of what's good would seem to be good, but from another perspective, it may not be so good.
Mm.
Because it will obscure what is already unconditional beingness that
Yeah,
is just the greatest well-being. It's the greatest gift,
yeah,
and
yeah. It's priceless. Yeah, 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 yeah. Um, and there's also room for paradox, isn't there? Like because I was a ravenous seeker for a long time, and I'm very grateful for the fact that I had that energy to look for answers, and one thing led to another, to another, to another, and I remember sitting down afterwards and writing down all these, oh yeah, this had happened and this and then that person and da 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 da, but then also the recognition that it was always just happening. But so I'm very grateful for that seeking energy. But and I've been fortunate enough to really follow my dreams in many ways. Wimbledon was my big thing, and I spent many years on the TV at Wimbledon, and BBC, and writing a book, and blah blah blah. Um, but uh, but then, a couple of years ago, when I've increasingly come and gone in this direction, but there were still some doubts, and they could resurface in anxieties and whatever else, and um, and so that sort of seeking energy, that there was a fear behind it of, oh yeah, okay, I'm aiming for this, but if it doesn't happen, then oh god, that's bad. And I imagine certain scenarios that would pop up. Now, what seems to have happened latterly is that, okay, let's say it all goes theoretically tits up, and well, then in which case, uh, fine, I'll go and do what I have to do. I remember again Eckhart Tolle said, "Well, go and sell tomatoes." Similar thing. I'll be like, okay, that could be kind of cool. And so, what seems to come from that then is that, okay, well, whatever happens is okay. Therefore, there's more of a freedom to actually lean into what I want to do, or what I feel called to do, but without that fear. And so, yeah,
yes.
so
Well,
there
yeah,
were all these funny like
yeah.
paradoxes and contradictions and all sorts of things in there.
Well, exactly, because when we're less attached to the outcome, of course, we it's great that we do what we're called to do,
Yeah,
and we're just letting everything unfold, and that includes in unfolding as us doing what we're doing.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Right. A couple of questions I had wrote down while you were chatting, that popped in my head is, now I know you can't. Well, actually, let me just carry out that, even though I haven't even started. But so the retreat I went on
Yeah.
was very powerful. and it used self-inquiry, and it'd be great to get onto koans and stuff like that, and but in a dyad format, and it was, I had no idea how powerful that could be. But a lot of people talk, oh, experience is overrated, or some people talk experience is overrated, and it's just this simple recognition of your own being, and I think there's some validity in that. But to me, that is stopping short. It's like, perhaps you might say, calling off the search, because actually the experience that we're talking about, the Kensho, like it 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 is more than that. It is more profound, and it absolutely is worth, um if you're blessed enough to experience it. Like, I mean, as we've said, like, it's priceless, right? So I just wonder what your take is on that juxtaposition, or the contrast between people who say, no, it's stop chasing enlightenment, or awakening, it's a fool's errand, B, there's nothing you can do to precipitate it, and C, it's not, we can just rest in being, for example, versus what we're talking about here of, no, like, this direct experience that can have such a profound impact in ways that really can't be described.
Yeah, look, I was appointed a teacher by my teachers, now, what is it, 15 or more years ago. And in that role, obviously, it's something I think about a lot because, well, I'll tell you where I've got to is that, yeah, my last book, Original Love, was laying out these 4 different sort of dimensions of the ways we can grow in our spiritual lives.
This is the 4 ins.
The 4 ins, yeah, because it was really important to me to say all this because I think there's a lot of confusion at the moment in the burgeoning world of interest in mindfulness and awakening. And sometimes they're conflated. And I think it's really not sort of correct. There's great experiences, there's great benefits, there's all kinds of good things we can get from meditation practice that are not what you and I have just been talking about with Kensho and non-dual experience. They're not that. But man, they're good. And now, for anybody who's really curious about discovering, who we really, really are deep down, you can't really. I just applaud it. I think it's good. Go for it, because there are things to discover. There just are. But at the same time, when we get strategic or tactical, it's actually quite smart to sort of set your compass heading like an old sailing ship, but know that you're at the mercy of the wind and the currents. You can't get yourself there.
No.
You can be going in the direction thereof, but it's not up to you when it falls on you. And meanwhile, there's a whole lot of helpful stuff you can be doing. So just know that you're curious and you're going in this direction, but you don't have to make it happen. You can't make it happen. All that you can do is your own practice on a consistent basis. I mean, actually, that's why, I've been part of a team that's made a meditation app.
Yes.
That's guiding people in such a way that they can let go of having to try. All they got to do is show up.
Yeah.
Because it's just a single long path.
Which I think is, just as an aside, I think that's so beautiful to take away it's like decision fatigue. I just wanted to say I love that about your app. But yes, sorry, carry on.
Yeah, but it's about it's about the decision fatigue, and it's also about, hey, you're doing your part just by showing up every day, and that's enough. And you can grow in lots of helpful ways along the way. And yes, your compass heading is awakening, but just know that you just trust that the vessel is taking you there. And so there's a lot of contradictory, or there's a lot of different views we could have about that. So just one sec. And because there are teachers who say don't talk about it because you'll set it up and as a goal, and what's going on here and now is insufficient then. But there are other traditions say, well, of course, of course there's a reality and that you can discover, and to know about it can be tremendously motivating and give an aspiration and stuff, and that's all positive. And at the same time, don't be seeking it. Don't be seeking it sort of by your own efforts. Your own efforts is just to keep being consistent, not to try to grab it. You can't grab it because you already are it. So
Yeah,
anything that you're looking for is not it by definition. So what the
yeah,
hell am I supposed to do? Well, that's where, it's just showing up for what is, showing up for
yeah,
what's here right now.
yeah, yeah. I had this funny moment where, when I was on my retreat, where I could sense something was coming, and I was very scared. Actually, I was surprised. Like, I'd always said to myself, "I want this," and then as it came close, I was like, "Oh, do I? Am I going to get home in one piece? Like, what the hell's going to happen? Am I going to, literally become the universe and expand? These kind of ideas." Um, and I said, or I certainly had the thought or the intention, "Universe, please be gentle with me." And it seemed to heed my wishes.
Yeah,
Like, so there's something very profound about that, in my view. Like, it felt like
yeah,
it was like, okay, a little
yeah.
stroke on the back, and it did that. I mean, I don't know if I'm
Oh,
imagining that. That's how it seemed.
that's beautiful. I mean, I'd say, look, for one thing, nothing's going to happen that isn't already happening.
Yeah.
And it's only about recognition. And for another, I think probably that appeal to, again, a kind of love
Mm.
probably assuaged your own fears.
Yeah, maybe. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, the yeah, I mean, I was incredibly lucky to eventually find my way to amazing teachers who were embodying something that I didn't think I'd ever get, but I could see they were embodying it, so I wanted to learn from them. And they happened to be in a tradition that I could really trust, and that wasn't out there, wasn't weird, it wasn't a cult. Demonstrably, you only met for 2 hours once a week, or twice a month. In one case, and so it was up to you to lead your life. No, they weren't telling you what to do with your life. They were just helping me with the practice. Not just me, obviously, all the people studying with them, and they were all kind of regular people. It wasn't like they'd given up their lives and were wearing special clothing and all of that. It was just so, to me, it felt really, really good to be part of an ancient tradition that was being lived in a kind of modern way, and that was very focused just on what I wanted to be focusing on, which was growing through having a meditation practice in
Mm.
all the dimensions that it could foster and help with.
Mm.
And um, so I was bringing that up by way of saying that for me personally, to get in a well-worn groove of practice that had been going on for over 1,000 years or maybe longer, and to just kind of finally feel a little bit of trust. I've been very distrustful. I've been knocking around spiritual meditation world. About 10 years after that first experience had happened, I started doing different retreats and kind of different practices and stuff with different people, and always I didn't really trust them. There's some ego here at work secretly. They've got power over others, and I just never. And certainly a lot of it was my own history with male authority figures, and being left by my dad when I was young, and there was a lot of. I was a very rebellious kid, and still was a rebellious guy. But when I eventually found, a teacher and sort of a group that just I couldn't level those things against them. They just weren't doing any of the things that I was kind of allergic to. And
Mm.
so I could just trust enough to let myself be helped. Only in the arena of this practice. They weren't going to tell me how to lead my life and what to do with my marriage and stuff. But they were going to help just in the territory of practice. That was just huge for me,
Mm.
because I was, it's like they say, when the student's ready, the teacher appears. For me, it was totally true. I was
Yeah.
ready, and it was a right teacher, and I could really sort of just go for this thing wholeheartedly,
Mm.
and
Yeah.
and Why am I bringing that up? Just as just another dimension that being
Yeah,
open to help can be so important. I mean, I
yeah,
think I was saying it because of your appeal to the universe to be gentle with you.
yeah,
Struck
yeah,
me as a little bit like that,
mm.
trusting that
Yeah,
there is help. We're not on our own in it, you know.
yeah, yeah, yeah. That's a really lovely way of putting it, actually. Yeah. I was reading about your meditative journey, and there was some transcendental meditation, and then some Zen and koans as well. But I'm just interested what you felt to be the most effective, or did one build on the other? For me personally, I did a just a simple mindfulness based stress reduction course, the John Kabat-Zinn one, and that was very powerful because I noticed such a difference after eight, whatever it was, 12 weeks, I think.
The classic one is an 8-week course.
Right. Okay. Maybe it was eight
Yeah.
then. But yeah, certainly by the end, I noticed, and my wife noticed a difference in me, and just the simplicity of, in my case, following the breath in the belly as someone who could be quite heady, and then the body scans and stuff like that. So that was one, and then I started playing around with Vedic meditation, so transcendental and mantra meditation, at the same time as my wife. Now, my wife is energetically very gifted, Reiki master, like just, out of body experiences. And this is all more latterly, but she was having head on the ceiling and, body disappearing. And I, at best, was having my hands open, and I got real experience envy. And that didn't work for me because of that, because I think I was having a kind of hoping of even small fireworks. Whereas, so I came back then to following my breath in the belly, because there was no expectation for that. It was almost just like lifting a dumbbell again and again, and I could see the benefit in just the repetition in that. But it was self inquiry. So working with Cohen's, and particularly on that retreat, which was just who am I. But prior to that, I don't know if you're familiar with Gary Weber at all, but he's got a book called Happiness Beyond Thought, and he is a great exponent of self inquiry. And so I was playing around, particularly with, for example, where am I and when am I? And I found that to be just, it was really impactful. Not necessarily impactful in the way that it was on the retreat, but it was impactful. So that was my journey. So koans. So to summarize, the breath, the mindful, the breath, the mindfulness of breath in my belly is always been like my go-to, just fruit and veg kind of thing. But then it was the koans that was the really powerful thing. So yeah, I just wonder if you could share your journey, and what was the most powerful for you.
Yeah, thank you so much for sharing that. It's really great to hear. In my case, it was the right things at the right time. I mean, I started with TM when I was 24, and man, I needed it. It was so good for regulating my nervous system that was frazzled and fried. I slept almost solidly for a week when I first started doing it.
Wow.
I was so exhausted without knowing it, running on anxiety, and that was tremendous for about 5 years. And then, but because I was starting to get better, I started remembering that incredible experience I'd had when I was 19. And I didn't feel that TM was going to help me with it. Actually, I might be wrong. It may be that it was, but it was around that time. It was actually when I first came to New Mexico when I was 29. I had this new friend, and she was into Zen, and she read a passage of Dogen, who's this 13th century Zen master. And as I was listening, I couldn't understand a word of it. But well, not while I was listening to it, later that day and the next day, I suddenly had this feeling that this kind of nonsense he was writing, I just suddenly got it. It's going to make sense from the perspective of what I experienced on that beach when I was 19. That experience would make sense of what Dogen was saying. Therefore, Dogen knew it. And that was it was a life-changing moment for me. Somebody else knew about it. And not only that, he was part of a sort of a world, Zen, that obviously knew about it. And the next day I said to my friend, I got to do Zen. And she said, I want to find out about Zen. How did it go? We had this little conversation. I want to know about Zen. Zen's not something you know about. It's something you do. Well, I want to do it. So she connected me with somebody here in town who just he says, sure. I'll teach you what we do. And it was Zazen, they call it, Zen meditation, seated Zen, literally Zazen. And we just sat. He told me, gave me a posture. TM didn't have a real posture, but this had a real posture. You had to have your back straight, hands in your lap. And he said, we're just going to follow our breath. Just like you said, belly breath. And it wasn't like I had some great experience then, but I had this sense, I just knew this simple posture, simple practice, I felt I'm meeting my very life in that, and it was so beautiful and vibrant, and I felt there's a whole journey contained in this moment, and that was different from the mantra in TM, that style, and I just wanted to do it. And then I was kind of worried. TM's been so good for me. Am I changing horses? And is it the right thing to do? But gradually, I just went all in on the Zen path. And one of the first long retreat, week long retreat that I did, a session as they call it, which was that was so challenging. But the practice was, who am I?
Right. Yeah.
Pick up the koan, who am I? And I was really lucky. I just was having a hellish time, and I was about to leave in the middle, and I didn't. And then suddenly I just got a moment of clarity about who am I, and I realized there's nobody here.
Yeah.
Yeah. This ship has no captain.
Yeah.
And it was a beautiful. It wasn't the same as the experience on the beach 10 years before then or 12 years before then, but it was so closely related. It was also it was another dimension. So actually, this is one thing I just wanted to say. There are different dimensions in Kensho.
Right.
And that's something that I kind of recognize. Like, there can be ones where you really just see there's nobody here. There's ones where the emphasis is it's all one. It's sort of one fabric. And there's ones where it's really all empty. You're looking and you don't see anything. Your eyes are open and you don't see anything. It's suddenly the world, it's like you see right through it to what it's really been all along. And so there are these, different facets. And sometimes I had a Kensho where it was like everything was a sort of black hole, but all phenomena were just pouring out of it into existence, like a river of lightning. Everything appearing, and that's a slightly different flavor. There can be these different dimensions that show themselves, and I think anytime somebody has like a second or a third or a fourth Kensho, it's never the same.
Right.
It's never. You don't go back to what you've seen before.
Okay.
So each one just opens up more dimensionality.
Interesting. Yeah.
But one's enough. I don't mean to say you need to have more, man.
Well,
one of my great teachers, she only ever had one.
Right. Yeah.
And it was enough.
Yeah. Yeah. So, when you described there's no one steering the ship, so when I had mine, I had two of what you've described, and the third thing you've described I haven't had, but I've heard, for example, Angelo DeLulo described it in very similar terms to what you did, of that complete emptiness of everything. But so I had where I was what I was looking at. So I was the observer and the observed. The trees, the mud, I was looking across this valley, and that was just like, whoa! Like, it was subtle. It wasn't. It was subtle, but it was still like so. Just the most. It was just the most beautiful thing. So that was that. I suppose that oneness. But then we went back into the hall where we were doing these sessions, and for a period, it's like speaking from that place, and it was so clear. It wasn't Simon speaking; it was the universe speaking. Yes. So when you say so. That is that the same as what you're describing there as no one steering the ship, because that it was that it wasn't Simon steering the ship, but it was the universe steering the ship, which is impersonal. I suppose that's the way I describe it.
That's exactly right. The ship has no captain.
Right.
It's exactly the same. It's exactly the same. But here's the thing. I don't know if this is getting really technical, but like the experience of seeing that the whole world sort of not really there the way we think. The seeing that total goneness. I would distinguish that in my own story. That was one experience. It's an amazing experience. By the way, I've written about all these in my book, One Blade of Grass.
Right.
For anybody who's interested, curious about this crazy stuff, But that wasn't the same as this later experience where there just wasn't anything. The difference was that first nothing at all, somehow there was a witnessing awareness. Somehow it left an impression. There had been some kind of awareness that registered this. But in the later experience that was really the life-changing one for me personally, was that there just wasn't anything. There really just wasn't anything. And the whole thing had been a kind of cosmic joke. And even the training and these different experiences, they'd all been a part of the cosmic joke.
Right.
And that was for me, that resolved things for me in a way that I didn't believe I didn't believe they could ever be resolved for me.
Right. Okay. Was that in any way challenging? And obviously there's no one for it to be challenging too, but was that in any way challenging or like shocking?
No, there was a quiet surprise. I kept expecting all my old troubles, or at least whispers of them, to come back in. And they just never did. They just never did, and I've thought in a way I'm quite a good test case, because I was really quite a troubled guy. I had a pretty traumatic. I mean, I had a very privileged upbringing. We were middle class. Both my parents were professors. They had very good educational opportunities, but I was very troubled. I had this terrible skin thing. I was in hospital for it as a kid several times, and it was very, very, very difficult. Crazy pain and itching, and very hard to be touched and hugged. I was a traumatized baby and toddler and boy, and then my dad left very painfully when I was 7, and I had my dose of trauma. I really did, and it went deep, and it took me quite a while to get okay. I got to a point where I was okay in by my late 20s. I was kind of okay, but I kind of was also still could get anxious, and in spite of my spiritual life and the grace of a few, 2 or 3 or 4 by then, by then 2 or 3 of these Kensho experiences. Actually, really 2 of these Kensho experiences, 19 and then 31 happening. I wasn't resolved. I wasn't, and even when I got into regular training and that was with koans, actually, starting with that koan, Who Am I, and then a whole load of them, book after book of them, and it was I was really lucky to be able to go through that kind of ancient training with people who were deeply schooled in it, and had these awakenings. They really had, and they were living them out in their lives. I felt so lucky to get that opportunity, but I was still, like I said, I'd be kind of good, and then trouble would creep back in, and disturbance and anxiety. Nothing like the intensity earlier, but it wasn't gone, and I just wasn't home, and then, but actually, the practice, the training, really can deliver. That we can, and you're doing great. I mean, I feel it. You've had a very decisive awakening. I think the fruit of all the work you've done. Forgive me. I hope this isn't rude of me to say all this.
No,
but
I appreciate it. Yeah,
I really feel the fruit of all the work you've done before this very nice, sweet, deep Kensho happened, has really allowed it to be blossoming in your life, and you obviously got a very wise, kind, open-hearted approach that it's met with, so that you can be open to whatever needs to still come up and show. So that's all that matters, actually.
Thank you. That's a very lovely thing to say. I really appreciate that. It's a lovely, like, your journey from, as you say, the skin condition, separation, through these until to be completely free of that. And I suppose this is partly how when people have said, "Why are you talking about this?" on occasion, not many have, but the odd one, which is fine. I think knowing it's possible is really helpful. I was fortunate enough to speak to people who I could just tell had a shift, and then it's like, well, kind of, why not? The comparison that pops in my mind is when Roger Bannister did the 4 Minute Mile, and then all of a sudden everyone was able to do it very quickly, and I think having that recognition that it's possible, and then there's that book, 4 Pillars of Zen, and they've got those Kensho experiences very clearly laid out, and so, I think hearing you talk about that, because there are a lot of people out there who are running really short on hope, and but actually, don't give up, because as you say, you never bloody know. You never know when it can go pop.
Exactly. We don't know what's around the next corner.
Yeah.
I totally agree. So I think also bringing them out of the shadows of where there's got mystique around them, and only the adepts get this and stuff. That's all not true. I know it's not true, because it's about our very own experience, each of us right here, right now. It's not some arcane thing that you have to work your way up, through many lifetimes or something. I don't believe any of that. It's just seeing your own conscious experience in a different way.
Yeah.
And any of us can do that.
Yeah.
And I think it's really healthy, actually, that folks like you and I are talking about it.
Yeah.
For the reasons you said, that, I mean, that it's real, that it's not some kind of self-delusion. That's a really important thing to say. I think it's the opposite. It's becoming less self-deluded. And actually, I have a deep confidence that the Western scientific evidence-based approach will shed more light on it.
Yeah. And there are little shoots of that, people like Donald Hoffman and the Nobel Prize 2022, that
totally,
it's edging in that way. And that's why I think when it really does go mainstream.
Well, with our app, we're just teaming up with it's early stages, but we're in the beginnings of teaming up with an academic team to do study on the 4 ins, on the 4 faces of practice and mindfulness, the connectedness and interconnectedness, support, flow states, and awakening.
Yeah. Absolutely. Can I just share a very quick story with you? So on my path, so I had a moment of surrender in sort of 2013, and things happened after that, and it led me to an ayahuasca retreat in 2015, and that was, I had no idea what was going on, and it was brutal, but it definitely it shifted some things for me. But I had this existential dread moment, because I was a sports reporter, and I had this view of myself as like okay, I won't dress it up. This is actually what I experienced, was as like a French philosopher a few centuries ago or something. And I was like, oh my God, I'm over here talking about sport when I want to be over here talking about philosophy, for want of a better word. And they're a million miles apart. And then I went back, and to the BBC. And then in time, I launched a podcast, which was initially called Don't Tell Me the Score. And it kept going towards flow. And I realized, oh, wow, like me as someone who'd loved tennis deeply. Like watching Roger Federer still is my go-to experience. Go-to, like if I've got 5 minutes when the kids aren't on the telly, I'll still go and watch one of his old matches. And I've realised it's watching flow. And the thing about flow, obviously, Csikszentmihalyi wrote that brilliant book, but everyone focuses on the performance and aspects of it. But to me, like the thing about flow is no self.
Yeah.
Like that's it. Like and so to summarize my book, in sport, it's like, oh, it's about the trophies, it's about the winning. Hold that up. Yeah, that's the ego story, but really it's the flow. It's losing ourselves in it, and that's so revealing. Anyway,
Yes.
sorry, I just wanted to add that in, just because that's what my ended up writing my book about basically what you've just described, and then it sort of led me over here. But one thing I wanted to ask, so you spoke about the app, and that's super interesting. And I'd love to follow that, and I'd love to sort of hear a timeline. But I had a question as well. So because obviously you go and do a lot of talks, and you go into businesses and corporations, and you speak about what we're about meditation, mindfulness, etc. To what degree do you stray into non-duality, and how have you sensed people in environments like that becoming more open to what we're talking about?
God, I mean, it's yeah, totally. I mean, basically, what I'll do is I'll just talk about, what it is to be here now, and drop all the plans and schemes and that we're habitually doing, and I'll try to get people to notice when they're drawn forward, drawn into the future, drawn towards the next moment or the next day or the next hour, just noticing that impulse come up, how much it comes up. And so I'm doing sort of, I'll lead some meditations in that territory. And I'm amazed at how often people who've never done it before, they just love it. They find they get some peace. Oh my gosh, I remember feeling like this when I was 6 years old in my granny's place in the garden under an apple tree or something, and because of course they're just coming back to our human nature that we're so habituated to not allowing ourselves to experience. So that's not surprising. But sometimes people really have like they're blown away. But I had this feeling of there's a great space and there was nothing in there, and and who knows what's going to show up, Sorry, so I'm just thinking. So I find that by focusing on the sort of beingness rather than the doingness, that can, sometimes it just naturally comes up to say something about maybe our sense of self isn't as solid as we think it is. Or something like that. I mean, I probably wouldn't normally just go full on into, hey, you're not separate from anything, you're the whole universe.
Yeah. You see,
I would
with
just
that pen, it's you. Yeah.
exactly.
Yeah. You've got to meet people where they're at. But that's encouraging that you notice there is a. What I've noticed when I've done a few talks recently is, and then because again, I'm lucky with the flow stuff and the interviews I've done, so I can couch it in sport or, right brain, left brain stuff. And, but then, I'm going to have a chat one-on-one, and then people will be like, but I'm really interested in, like, again, we're just not at that point yet where people can go, yeah, it's like admitting you've got imposter syndrome or something like that. It's just not quite, there's just not that tipping point of people yet, I feel like.
It's very close. It's very close. And a lot of people, they have it, but they might be a little shy of talking about it.
Yeah.
By the way, I just want to, here's just a little point that I would make, and I don't know, you might disagree with me, about flow. I totally agree with you. The sense of self is dormant in flow. It's gone. But to me, that's not the same as seeing through the sense of self.
Yeah.
I know lots of people who they get into flow when they're riding their mountain bike, playing tennis, playing a musical instrument, but that's not Kensho.
No, I agree with that. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Just want to check.
Absolutely. It's more, for me, it's more like the fact that we love it. It's like a hint.
I totally agree. Exactly. That's the evidence that this world of non-separateness is sort of calling us.
Yeah.
Somehow we all know that we belong there. I think we all know it deep down.
Yeah, of course. Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah.
And often, people choose their profession based on the activity that they found flow in.
which makes a lot of sense. Like,
Totally
certainly,
does.
that's so case in point, this conversation. I'm so fortunate to have had so many conversations like this, and this is, there's nothing much I'd rather do. I'm looking at the time thinking, okay, well, I'll have to wrap up soon, because I know we've sort of gotten a lot of time, but I could quite happily sit here for maybe I'll refill the glass of wine, but apart from that, I like, what better could there be to do? So what a gift. I think, absolutely follow your flow, or follow those things, and follow your heart. Right. Last question then, Henry. When we exchanged emails briefly before, you did say about the duality and non-duality. So I just wanted, there's kind of the paradox I think you were alluding to, and I don't know to what degree we've touched on it, because it's just been sort of flowing, but just on this, because something that comes to mind is, a lot of people who talk about no self, for example, then say, there's one comment that really stuck with me. Someone was like, well, I've been married a couple of times, and do you know what I learned? I learned nothing, because there's no self to learn anything. And I was a bit like, oh God, that's, so to me, there is this paradox of, in non-duality, there's room for duality too. Yeah. Anyway, I just wonder what you thought.
Yeah. I mean, I think there's just one thing to emphasize, and I think you've been emphasizing it really nicely and very clearly, is there's a world of difference between sort of thinking we understand this stuff and actually experiencing it. So we could talk about non-duality, we could talk about no self, and it's almost totally irrelevant until we experience it. Until we experience it, we don't realize how much all of my experience has been filtered by my sense of self, has gone through the valve of my sense of self. We just don't realize it until we've had a glimpse that it's never really been there. So that's one thing. Like, just having some understanding of the idea of it. It's just, it's like having heard the name Beethoven, but you never heard one of his symphonies. You have to experience it to know it. And to realize why it matters, So that's one thing. But another thing I'd say is, like, this, okay, maybe this is a little bit for the, the people deep in it already, but a lot of people will be in some phase where they see it, they're free as self, and then their self is back, and it's troubling and it's difficult, and they flip flop back and forth. And that is a stage that a lot of people seem to go through if they're on this deeper path. I'm in it, I'm here, now I'm gone and I'm free, and now I'm back and I'm free, and I'm back and I'm free. That kind of duality, where on the one hand there's one thing is seeing the world and no self and the non-separateness, and then back to being me, and that kind of duality. And of course, it's great that you've seen it at all this, and you come to know it a bit, and that you're sometimes in it. Great. But the real, I think you don't need to hear this, but because you're there already. But the real freedom is in when it's not one or the other. Because actually, the true sort of non-dual world totally accepts the self that makes duality. Totally accepts it, and I think if the key ingredient again is the love, the compassion.
What a beautiful place to finish. I think that's such a nice place to finish. Yeah, it comes back to love. And Henry, I've truly loved spending time with you, as I absolutely knew I would. And it's just been such a gift. Very, very grateful. I hope we can speak again. I'd love to. Maybe we could make it a yearly thing or something, because honestly, just so lovely. Really, really beautiful. So thank you so much.
Well, I've had a lovely, lovely time. I'm really honoured and delighted to get to know you and spend some time with you. Thank you.